Hello, my name is Anthony Hudson. I am writing this letter before I kill myself, because I know that I am certainly doomed. I'm convinced. The black deer will not stop until it gets what it wants. God, I wish I knew what that was. For whoever is reading this, I believe that death was a much better fate than what this monster had planned to do with me. I know that much. You're probably asking yourself, what is the black deer? Well, that's quite a difficult question to answer, because to be honest, I'm not even sure myself what it is. That is just a name I gave it. I simply don't know what anyone would gain from reading this, but my story must be told before I go. My story begins in the year 1994. My parents had just gotten divorced. My mother took my sister and I with her when she moved. I was only 12 years old at the time, and I had mixed feelings about the divorce and going to a new place. But to be honest, I hated the place we were living in at the time and was glad to leave that suburban dump behind. I can remember it like it was yesterday as we pulled into the driveway of our new house. I instantly took a liking to our new home, especially the fact that it was so secluded. I breathed in the pure country air that surrounded us. I loved every minute of it. The coolest part of the land was a forest behind our house that stretched for miles. I decided then that I would spend pretty much all of my spare time in the woods. It's amazing what a 12-year-old kid in his imagination can come up with. The only thing that was really bothering me at the time was the nightmares that I kept having. It was strange, because I rarely had nightmares before I moved into the new house. I can remember it so clearly, the dream that is. I was in the forest behind my house, just standing there. I was in a clearing surrounded by a thick tree line. In the distance I could see through the shadowy darkness what looked like a lantern coming closer and closer to me. Finally, whoever it was holding the lantern came into view under the light of the full moon that was looming in the sky. It was just a boy about my height, frantically running towards me. I realized that I could not move. The boy moved closer to the point where the rays of the lantern illuminated his face. I was astonished at what I saw. The boy's face looked exactly like mine. I also noticed that he was dressed in 1700s style clothing. The boy seemed to run right through me. As he did, I saw him running the other way. I had turned around as he passed through me, but I still couldn't move. The boy's lantern's rays flickered upon a large decrepit tree that appeared in the middle of the clearing. He stopped and seemed to be paralyzed with fear. He dropped the lantern, and that's when I could see several dark, cloaked figures materialize in the darkness around the wicked-looking tree. I could hear some sort of chant, like a prayer. It was in a low tone, so it was very difficult to hear, and I could not make out what was being said. That's when I would wake up in a cold sweat, with a feeling of morbid dread. It was years since I lived on my mother's property, and I'm 21 now. I'm going through hard times in my life. For starters, I lost my job, and my girlfriend of 3 years decided to leave me for some rich scumbag. The anchor of financial debt is sinking me deeper and deeper into depression. There comes a time when every man has to swallow his pride and move back in with his mother. So that's what I did. The day I pulled into her driveway, my mother greeted me with open arms as she always did. My mother lived in a big 2-story cypress house on a large 12-acre property. She had the one-room side house fixed up so I could live there rent-free and look for a new job. My mother has always been the only person there for me in hard times. It wasn't long after I settled in that strange things started happening in my new home. The black shadows that I saw years ago, I saw again and again every night at the foot of my bed. The only door to my house slammed shut almost every night. I turned back into the frightened little boy that lived here many years ago. I thought that dark chapter in my life would never be reopened. There was this one instance where I was getting ready in front of the mirror for a job interview. My reflection seemed like someone else staring back at me with a sinister look in his eyes. I threw that fucking mirror out of my house. I kept having nightmares similar to the ones I had had as a kid. But in this new nightmare, I would be walking through the forest. The sky was a gloomy gray color, but not as dark as it was in my previous nightmares. The atmosphere was heavy and dreadful. I came upon a large tree in an opening much like the one I encountered years ago, except this time the tree had a huge gaping hole in it with a few scorched scratch marks on the sides of the hole, like something had broken out of it. Then, I felt like there was something behind me breathing down my neck. That's when I woke up in a cold sweat. Life continued to be a living hell for a while. The paranormal phenomenons that kept happening began to wear me down into a state of mental anguish, causing splitting headaches that couldn't be cured. It was at this time that I decided I needed help. I contacted a paranormal investigator named Judith Foster. She came to take pictures of my house the very next day. She said that it might be an intelligent haunting, and the photos might reveal something so that she could further assess the case. Before she left that day, she said she would call me as soon as she developed the photos. The night after I consulted with Judith, I came home from my new job. It was late, and I was very tired, so I decided to crash. I woke up about an hour later, and it was extremely cold in my one-room home. I figured my door was probably open, but before I could sit up in the bed to analyze the situation, I heard the echoing sound of hooves on my wood floor, along with a slight noise that sounded like a baby crying. I was instantly paralyzed with fear. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was about to burst. I finally mustered up the courage to sit up so I could see towards the door. The moonlight came in from the outside so that I could see clearly as to what was going on. Standing in my room was a very tall, black silhouette. It seemed to have antlers, not unlike those you would find on a deer, and its bottom half seemed to be that of a goat. It hissed at me in a low, growling tone. It then let out an ear-piercing shriek before vanishing in a whirlwind of black shrouds that came from nowhere. The whirlwind left my house and slammed the door behind it. The day after the encounter, I contacted the paranormal investigator and told her to meet me at my house ASAP. I wanted to tell her in person what happened. She agreed and said that she had developed the photos and wanted to show them to me anyway. Later on that day, Judith arrived. I invited her inside while lighting up a cigarette and led her to the table to tell her about the encounter. She was amazed by what I said. She revealed the photos to me, the photos that I was in. My face was blurred. There was also an obscured black figure standing behind me in one photo. It seemed to have antlers, like what I saw the night before. Judith said that this was more serious than she had thought before, and that she would contact a medium she knew named Deborah Barish. One week later, on an abnormally cold night for October, Judith, Deborah, and I sat around the table. Judith had brought 2 of her colleagues to accompany her. Candles were lit, and we all sat down at the table. The medium instructed us to close our eyes and hold hands as she would begin to make contact. "Spirit, appear before me," Deborah said. The air became very still, as if time had stopped. Beads of sweat began to form on my forehead. I suddenly felt like I was going to be sick. The medium continued with her questions. Why are you bothering Anthony? I command you, in the name of Lord Jesus Christ, to answer my questions. In that instant, I began to vomit and spit blood. My head forcefully jerked back, and my mouth stretched open, and a black liquid began to emerge. The substance seemed to defy gravity as it came from my mouth and remained floating in the air. The last bit of the mass came out of my mouth and hovered weightlessly over us like a cloud in the room. Judith and her 2 colleagues suddenly stood up and stepped back. In the name of Lord Jesus Christ, I cast you out, Deborah commanded to the entity. The black cloud that was floating in the room began to accumulate and take shape. Within a matter of seconds, there before us stood the same black antlered demon that I encountered a few nights ago. When I came out of my trance, I realized the others were struggling and screaming while floating in midair. I heard the distinct sound of several spines cracking loudly. The black deer screeched like a banshee and disappeared into thin air, leaving me in the room with the dead bodies. I realize now that it will haunt me forever. I can't stand this anymore. It's driving me into insanity. This gun I have will solve my problem. I felt sorry for the others, but they are in a better place now. God will understand if I kill myself. I hope everyone else will too. I'm sorry, Mom. Goodbye. Entry submitted. One detective looks at another. What the hell happened here? The detectives watched as the coroners exited 5 occupied body bags out of the house and loaded them into a van. Anthony, the one that lived here, has what appears to be a self-inflicted bullet wound in his head. The other bodies were identified as Judith Foster and Deborah Barish. We're still looking into the identity of the other 2 bodies. The other detective looked up. My God, homicide, suicide maybe? I don't know. Judith Foster was always going on these weird paranormal investigations. Sooner or later I knew something was going to happen. But I find it hard to believe that Anthony would be able to snap 4 spines before taking his own life. The other detective said, There's a computer over there with an open text document. Maybe that will give us some answers. The case was closed, being ruled as a homicide-suicide. That was 10 years ago. The town forgot all about the incident. Anthony's mother passed away, and the property was put on the market. It was purchased soon after, and the deal was finalized. A blue Dodge Caravan was parked outside of the 2-story Cypress house. A husband and wife were unloading boxes into their new house. They had a teenage daughter who wasn't too happy about the move and wanted nothing to do with the unpacking. Both parents rolled their eyes. Why don't you go exploring? Your mother and I have to figure out where everything is going anyway, said the father. The daughter responded with a sarcastic, whatever, as she reluctantly ventured off. She headed towards an old swing set by the side house. As she went to go put her headphones in so as to drown out the cruel world with her rock music, she noticed that someone was in the rundown side house staring at her from the window. The person looked like a young man. Out of morbid curiosity, she entered the side house. She was consumed by the feeling of dread upon entering. She heard the sound of someone crying in the far corner. There appeared to be someone cowering in the corner. Are you okay? She asked. The person disappeared before her. She began to panic, realizing she had seen a ghost. She quickly turned around to leave when she came face to face with a large black figure with antlers.